We are your missionaries to the Philippines, and I'll get into some of the dynamics of why we're here and part of the COVID stuff. But first, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about what we are currently doing in the Philippines, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the COVID stuff in the Philippines, and then I have a time for some questions. And here's the deal. I was planning on like 35 minutes, but now I have 45 minutes. And so then I had prepared like a 5-minute little message after we had a myriad of questions about our ministry. But so if there's no questions, I'm going to have to get into a full message, which is going to keep us here till 7:15. So think of lots of questions so that we don't have to do that. No, I'm kidding. If we get out early, we get out early, and that's great, and everybody gets to visit a little bit longer. But let me just get into my notes. But the video, that's our most recent video that we've done, and it's kind of a team recruiting video, and that's kind of what we show people when we're saying, come out and visit us in the Philippines, but it also does a good job of explaining what we do and why we do it. We talk about breaking the cycle of poverty, and the cycle of poverty is essentially the people that live in the communities that we serve are stuck there unless something is done to break the cycle of poverty. We can't just feed them because generations and generations will stay there. If they just get food, it's not enough. If we just address some medical issues, not enough. There's an entire cycle that we've identified of things that need to be done to help someone escape extreme poverty. And we've kind of narrowed it down to 3 things that we focus on, and that is loving, teaching, and serving. And so loving is what we do in an orphanage. We provide a family atmosphere. We take care of, currently we have 60 orphans in our orphanage just outside of Manila. We care for them in entirety. We work with the Department of Social Welfare and Development, which is called the DSWD in the Philippines, and they're the ones that bring us kids when kids are found that are abandoned, when kids are abused, when kids are in a scenario that their parents can't take care of them properly. The DSWD works through the process, similar to social welfare here, and they contact us and they say, we have a kid. Our orphanage was originally built for 30 kids, but it's hard to say no. It's hard to say no when DSWD calls and says, hey, we got a kid and this is the scenario. How do you say no to that? If you don't take it, they're usually going to end up in a state-run home where there are a lot more issues. And we know that we provide a loving, caring, Christ-centered environment for those kids to grow up in while we have them. We try to adopt them out, working with agencies here, agencies in the Philippines, agencies all over the world to try to find suitable homes for our kids that are able to be adopted. We also do a lot of mentoring programs with kids in that community, and we also feed a lot of people. We have a schedule of 6 days a week where we feed 2 communities a day. And what we do is we go out with a bucket of, it's literally a Rubbermaid container of what we call lugao, which is rice, like a rice porridge, but it's fortified. There's eggs, there's protein, vitamins, and minerals. And we take it out and we feed children. It starts with children and elderly in poor communities, and then if there's extra, we'll feed other people. And a lot of people will stand around and wait to see if there's extra. But we really focus on orphans and widows, and then prioritize children and elderly. So that's the loving side of what we do. That's what we highlight. There's a lot of little pieces in addition. Teaching is the next thing. Probably what I believe is the second biggest hurdle to escaping poverty is education. The Philippines has one of the worst public education systems that I'm aware of because of the corruption in the government and because of the corruption in how things happen. Kids that are stuck in public school are stuck in huge classes, and they talk about class size. Rizal Provincial High School is the largest high school in the world. And I believe there's around 80 kids per classroom. I don't know how old that statistic is, but at one point there were 80 kids to one teacher. And so and even to do that, there's a lot of expense. It is public, and it is free in a sense, but you have to get there. You have to buy your books. You have to buy your uniform. There's a lot of expenses, and in a corrupt government, in a corrupt country like the Philippines, there are a lot of people that are trying to make money while doing these things, while providing your uniform. Well, if it costs me 100 pesos, which is about $2 for a t-shirt, I'm going to charge the students 300, and I'm not going to give them any opportunity to buy anywhere else except for me. And so they kind of slip that stuff in there. And so a good education is hard to find. Through Quattro Christian School, we educate 600 kids who don't have to pay for it. We raise the money, we build the buildings, we provide everything through churches and through supporters and through programs that we work with across the world: Australia, United States, Europe, Asia. The one thing that they do have to do, parents do have to do, is a couple work days to kind of earn the education that the students are getting. It's not a money thing, but it is we need your help, and so we do some projects, and they have to sign up for a certain amount of projects throughout the year so that their kids' education is free. Something that's really, really exciting in the last year and a half is we bought land and we developed a project to build a $3 million high school. And the reason we needed to do that is in the Philippines, you have most schools, and most smaller schools would be what you call junior high schools. And junior high schools only go to 10th grade. We created a program called Beyond CCS, where we helped kids in the 11th and 12th grade go to other schools and pay for their transportation and pay for their books and pay for tuition, and there's a voucher system. But it got to a point where I said, why aren't we just doing this ourselves? We're sending them out into a worldly environment. We're making them go far away from home. And we thought, let's just do this ourselves. And our organization is in the middle of probably what's going to be a 5 to 6 year plan to build a $3 million school. And it's going to be awesome. Kids that grew up in shacks, that are still living in shacks, get to go to a $3 million high school. And that'll be a pretty cool deal when that's done. And so education is a big thing. Val and I are involved with Faith Academy, which is where our kids go to school, and that's the international school side of it. So Val teaches PE. She's currently teaching PE in the Philippines from here because of COVID. But we have roles at Faith Academy in addition to me being on the board for the organization that runs the orphanage and the school. So we are big on education, and it's a huge thing in terms of escaping the cycle of poverty. It's getting an education is one of the big things, second only to what we believe is a loving relationship with Jesus Christ. We believe that is the biggest thing to help someone get out of poverty because it puts meaning on everything else. And so the last piece in loving, teaching, serving is serving. And what that means is we serve Filipinos. One of the big parts of our ministry that was really disrupted because of COVID is guest teams. And you saw our video, and even last time we were on furlough, we started to talk about Elm Grove bringing a group out. And I talked to Daniel, we're going to try to make that happen. So big part of what we do is bring teams to come out to the Philippines, because it's important to experience what it means to serve. And serving food to poor people, tutoring kids in our school, teaching them, helping them learn English better, working in our construction projects. When we talk about building a school over the next 5 to 7 years, it takes people coming out and helping us build. We don't, you build a school here, we come by and we see all of the things happening, Baser Linwood Middle School, and I drive by and there's all these big cement trucks, and there's like these pump trucks that put cement up, and that's how they pour upper levels. When in the Philippines, We'll get 40 or 50 people, and we'll get hopefully we can get a cement mixer. Sometimes we just got guys mixing it by hand. And we will fill up 1 gallon bucket at a time. And we will hand it up all the way up to the 3rd floor, to the 4th floor. And 1 gallon at a time, we'll pour a 2,000 square foot floor that's that thick with cement. And it takes 50 hours. And so there's a lot of times where we're asking teams to come and help so they can be a part of that, and so that they can walk away knowing they've contributed, but also seeing what happens is such a big part of our ministry. The reality is I don't need 50 people or 20 people or 10 people to come out and feed kids. I've got staff, our ministry has staff that could do that. What is important is that people come and see what's happening, see what the missionaries are doing, understand how global missions works. And so we provide that. We provide an opportunity for people to come serve. And it's also pretty fun. The Philippines is a lovely place. And so we really encourage teams to come out. And when I get into our COVID stuff, we'll talk a little bit about that. But short-term teams, serving pastors and serving churches. Everything about our ministry is Christ-centered mentality. And we call it kingdom focus, in that if I do everything to help you escape the cycle of poverty and you die without a knowing, saving relationship of Jesus Christ, I've failed you completely. And so what we're trying to do is everything is used to point people to a church, to a relationship with Jesus Christ, and to discipleship, to mentorship, and to being a healthy son or daughter of Jesus Christ. We don't do anything without working through the local church. And so if I'm going to work everything through the local church, I have to support the local church, and I have to support local pastors. And so we provide materials, we provide resources, we provide facilities, and anything we can to help local churches exist. And because at the end of the day, I don't often lead people to Christ personally, because there's a whole relational side to Filipino culture that even after 15 years, I don't always get. What I do is I put them in a position and I hand them to a pastor and I say, hey, this person has a lot of questions about what it means to know Jesus and what it means to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And we do that intentionally, and we have pastors and we have churches involved because they're the ones that are going to be responsible once that person does sit down and maybe say a prayer. Then they need to be discipled, they need to grow, and the church is the one that's going to do that. So we just act as advocates for the church when we go out to feed, when we go out to partner. Everything we do is pointing back to the local church. And so that's what we've done for the last 15 years, and we've kind of been around with Faith Academy, but Kids International Ministries has been going since about 2006. So we went over in 2005, and about a year later helped get that going. And then COVID hit. So on March 17th, we got a message saying the country is shutting down. And I've been up here a little bit talking about some of those dynamics. But we were in quarantine. We were in a military enforced quarantine from March 17th until we left on June 4th. We could not leave our house. And the rule was, if you're under 21 or over 60, you cannot leave the house. And then, if you live with someone who's under 21 or over 60, you can't leave the house. And the Philippines culturally has very multi-generational housing, meaning 3 or 4 families, like the kids and the parents and the grandparents and sometimes even great-grandparents, they all live in the same house. And so they effectively made it so that they could enforce restrictions on anyone they wanted to. And then they said, well, if you don't live with someone in that category, which is everybody, well, you can get a pass. And we would go, I could go to the grocery store on Wednesdays and Saturdays. The only time I could leave, I'd have to go through a military checkpoint with a pass to go to the grocery store and then come back. So it was pretty rough, yet we were largely unaffected compared to Filipinos. Filipinos were locked in subdivisions with military guards not letting anyone come and go. If they had places to buy goods in that subdivision, they could not leave. And so it got to be really difficult, and we started to say, well, how are we going to address this as a ministry? And in the height of it, we were feeding 30,000 people a day the lugao, and the rice porridge stuff that we make. And we had to really amp up our production, and we did a whole thing with how we made it. So we were starting at 10 o'clock at night and working till 6 in the morning, and we were literally filling trash cans that were clean and disinfected, but we were filling trash cans with hot soup, and we were taking it out, handing it off to local churches and local pastors who would then, because we could not go into these communities, we would hand it off to the local pastors or local church members who would then take it into the communities and feed people. Because we rely so heavily on guest teams, we ran out of help. And once everything hit and nobody was coming in, we ran out of help. And it's such a neat thing when God starts taking stuff away from you and you figure out new ways to do it, a lot of times there's a better way to do it. And one thing we've been really excited about is we started to work with these same churches that were doing feedings, and we'd have to work with their government to get them out of their subdivisions, but we actually started using local youth groups to come in, stay at our guest house facility, and work on feedings and take care of all the things that guest teams were doing. And we call it Youth Lab, and we've actually had, I'd say probably close to 100 people come to know Christ through our Youth Lab, our new program that we're using. And through all the feedings, we've had over 1,000 people who have expressed, and I say they've expressed an interest. Because we work through the local church, we don't always get the numbers of who's been saved and who's been baptized. And some pastors are so busy, they don't tell us, they don't keep track all the time. But we've had over 1,000 people that have requested further information, meaning they're working with their church to get into a Bible study. And so we provide those materials, and so that's kind of how we count. Over 1,000 decisions to join something because they wanted more information about knowing Jesus and a relationship with Jesus. And so it's been a fairly exciting, crazy last 6-8 months for us, or 6 or 7 months for us. And as we look at where we've come from and where we are, we're as everyone else, hopeful that COVID will just disappear. But until then, we've actually been really given some really neat opportunities to continue to serve Filipinos and serve churches and serve pastors so that they can have their role and their part in getting the gospel out to people. For our family personally, we are here because we are not allowed to go back. We knew this when we left, but we had been stuck in quarantine for 3 months, almost 3 months, and Faith Academy announced that it would do everything online. The government said they're shutting down everything, and they're still shut down today, same as they have been with military and force. They've loosened up on what they call essential business, so a lot of more people are able to work. But we are here until the government opens up for immigration, and then we'll reevaluate. There may be a scenario where if all the school stuff stays online, and we would be stuck in our apartment, we would stay here a little bit longer. But we ask that you just pray for us about that as things change and as God opens doors, that we would find that clarity of when to go. Like I said, Val she's teaching PE in the Philippines from Kansas City, and it's all online. And I'm doing a few things related to Faith Academy, but most of the work I'm doing here is through Kids International Ministries and board meetings and finance stuff and all that. So I think that's all I have about ministry updates. So now is the time when you could ask me some questions. I can't get out of here too early because Brother Siebel will have my head.
Tell us about some of the churches that you supported or that you're working with. Are
Okay, so the two churches that we directly sponsor in the community, where we're in what's called Quattro Community, and it's a squatter village. It's a village where people just built up shacks on other people's land, and they live there. And in the Philippines, if you do that, if you build a shack on someone else's land, after a certain amount of time, you own the rights to that land. It's a really weird deal, but it was a political ploy to get some votes, and it worked. So in this squatter village where we work, we have Tagumpay Baptist Church, which was an existing church, and then Jesus Christ Church in the Valley, which we helped start. Next door they had a evangelical free seminary, and then we've kind of morphed it. We've partnered with them, and it's part of our school now. And we have missionaries that kind of run that church. But that's 2 out of what I would say is 75 or 80 churches. Most of them, the Philippines is actually an amazing place if you're looking for a church. There's churches everywhere. Little Baptist churches, little Christian churches, it's a predominantly Roman Catholic, but it really has little churches everywhere. They just have no resources. And their social care is very limited. So that's where we come in. We haven't had to start many churches. What we've done is we've embraced and supported existing churches that are there. And I think we're looking at almost 100. It was 70 some in the middle of the COVID stuff, and then it's just growing. Through again, people find out, I can send my youth group to work at this ministry center, or I can get resources and I can get food for my community. We get a lot of pastors saying, hey, how do I get involved? How do I? And we're not, we try not to turn them down. Our director is very keen on just saying, let's find a way. Let's find a way to help these people. And let's find a way to work through these churches to continue to spread the gospel through caring for people socially. So it's really impossible. It's tough to identify. Outside the 2 that we are directly, Tagumpay Baptist Church meets in our school building, and Jesus Christ Church in the Valley we partner with them on facilities, and that's how we're able to support those 2 churches. But there's a lot more that just vary. Yes. I'll talk about my kids. Again, we were very fortunate to get out when we did. And then we're staying with my parents, who are very kind to invite 7 or allow 7 people to come in. We kind of invited ourselves, but to have 7 people come in. But Lansing School Districts is where we've always gone when we've been on furloughs. And we're in that district, and it's a very good, it's where I went growing up, part of my years, and so it's a really good situation. They're live 4 days a week, and then they're online 1 day a week. So they're going to Lansing. They get to do sports, and they get to do a lot of the activities. A few things have not happened, but very different than what we get to do in the Philippines. Like Deacon, for example. We always talked, he loves football, and we just said, buddy, we're not ever going to be in the States around football time. Well, now we are. And so he's getting to play football. We actually we were blessed to get to go to a Chiefs game. So we're kind of checking all those boxes while we're here, because we usually wouldn't be here. We were supposed to be home for the summer, just to see family and catch up, and we'd have been here obviously, but now we're here, and we're just, just trusting God that we are where He has us is where He wants us and where we're supposed to be. And there is some anxiety. No, I wouldn't say anxiety. There's some questions about what's going to happen and how things are going to go. But we've learned in 15 years being on the field that He's usually got us. He's always got us covered. We don't always love it, but if you stop and find the joy in Him, you don't have to worry about all the other stuff. So our orphanage, we have, of the 60 kids in our orphanage, we're probably, under 16 is probably 45 to 50. And it comes and goes, the total numbers. It goes because as kids get adopted or, and ultimately the goal is to get them back. If they're in our home because they've been removed from a parent situation, the goal is to get them back to their parents. And we work with the parents with programs to try to help provide them resources to get jobs and find housing and all that stuff. But when they don't, then we are left to age them out of the system. So we run, probably 45 to 50 in our actual home up to age 14, 15, 16. Depends on maturity, depends on a handful of things. And then we take them to what we call an independent living facility that we have. So I think we have 7 to 10 kids in our independent living facility right now, and that's where they learn to, so that's later stages of high school. They learn to manage money, and they learn to cook food, and most people in the Philippines don't drive, so they learn to do public transportation. And it's common for a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid to just get on a jeepney, which is like a bus, and then ride it down and get on another one and ride it down. And that's how, when I talked about kids commuting to school, that's how they would get to school, is through public transportation. So as we progress them out, we want to put them in a position to be successful. So giving them an allowance where they have to manage money, and giving them an understanding of making food and being independent. And so we get them, we are responsible for them until they're 18, but we care for them until they get out of college. And then we try to figure out from there. We actually have never had someone go that long, but the game plan is either they're adopted out, or we've had some runaways, or we've had some kids that had to get moved to different facilities by their choice. So we haven't had anyone go all the way through college, but we have a few girls right now that are getting to the end of high school, and we're hopeful that we can bring them all the way to the program and even offer them jobs. We need bookkeepers, and we need cooks, and we need people to do certain things. So if we can bring them through an education, we'd love to rehire them within our ministry. And we're looking to even create some programs that provide jobs so that as kids cycle through, we can provide them jobs. Because Manila is 25 million people. It's big. It's one of the top 5 or 10 densest cities, depending on what stats you look at, in the world. So there's just people everywhere. So there aren't a ton of opportunities for jobs. And you would need a college degree to work at a McDonald's as a cashier or a food prep guy. So it's different, whereas here you don't have to have that level of education. But because there's so many people, they bump up the standards just to level it out a little bit. Does that make sense? Oh, we have babies. If people come on ministry trips, some people just spend all day in the nursery holding babies. We probably have 15 or less babies, which is under a year at any given time. And babies need to be held. So we have sign-up sheets and different things, but some people will spend all day in the nursery, and obviously feeding and changing diapers and doing whatever else. But yeah, we picked up a kid. We named him Moses. We got to name him. But he was in a basket by the river, and he was delivered to us from DSWD, and that was this story. And that was 12 years ago. The family that adopted him came back 2 years ago and adopted another kid and brought him with us. So little Moses was now big, chubby Moses. So it was great. It was amazing because he was a skinny baby, and so it's fun. We do not individually, but we work with a lot of people that do. We have, there's a group called Grow International, and they do a lot of aquaponics with the fish and there's a local businessman that gives us 5,000 eggs a week to help support our ministry. And on weeks where we don't have that much use, we have a few different other ministries that we give it out to because they're feeding people in their communities, and that's one. So in a sense, we're partnering limited basis with some people that do, but we do not. However, at our school where we're building, we've just bought, I think we spent about $300,000 on land through some donations that were made. And it's going to take a long time to build our school. So we actually have designated, once school starts, to have a class where they're learning some of that stuff. But it hasn't happened yet. School just started October 4th in the Philippines, and it's all online. So when they open up and they're doing in-person school, we're actually planning to do some of that stuff on the property while we're waiting to build buildings for education. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for some people, that's the only way they make it, is to grow their own food and in certain areas go fishing. And there's not a lot of ground to do gardening in the Philippines, but where we're at, there's a few little patches, and they'll do planter boxes and put them in places. But there is a lot of farming that happens just as a way to make ends meet and a way to provide food for the family. It's hot. Yeah, there's hot season where it's hot and dry, and then there's rainy season where it's hot and rainy. Brother Siba caught me the other day. He's like, you have to wear a tie if you're speaking. And then he was like, unless you wear one of those goofy things that you wore before. And I got this one, and I thought, it's so cold, and the only barong, it's called a barong, the only barong I have here is this short sleeve barong, and it's so cold. And then in the Philippines, I have like 3 or 4 long sleeve, nice and warm barongs, but I guess that's the way it goes. But yeah, it's hot, it's tropical. It's hot and humid, or it's hot and dry. Yeah.
What's the money exchange rate in dollars to whatever your...
The Philippine peso is about 50 pesos per dollar. And so the way that we gauge it, the way that I try to make it seem realistic is the McDonald's. So here you get a Big Mac extra value meal, it's about $6-7. And in the Philippines, to get a Big Mac extra value meal, it's about $2.50 to $3, $2.50 to $3. So it's not quite 50 times spending power. It's about, I think your dollar goes about twice as far in most scenarios. Yeah, American dollars.
So basically you get 50 times.
Yeah, it would be 150 million pesos. And we don't have that much in the bank. We don't have that much designated. But as teams come over, and as people hear about what we're doing, and as people pray for us, and God provides, it just comes a little bit at a time. And we often use the same illustration with the bucket going up to pour the 3rd and 4th floor. It's just one little bucket at a time. And a team will sometimes provide a couple $1,000s, and a donor will sometimes provide $100,000. But we're committed to doing it, and God will provide when He's ready, when the time comes. And we're excited for that day, and we'll just keep working until that happens. And when that's done, we'll find something else. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. So, most people are like, oh, so you're the basketball guy. We still run Buhay Sports. It's still a part of, when we talk about short-term teams, it's still a part of what we do. I don't get to do it as much anymore because I'm getting old and slow, and you can tell probably I don't exercise a ton. But I don't, nothing has shut down on that. It's really just when we get teams. Buhay Sports relies on guest teams coming in because Filipinos love seeing foreigners. They love knowing that foreigners are here to play basketball because they love basketball. So it's kind of on hold right now, but I probably have a dozen people that are interested whenever they can go back in the country. So yeah, that's a part. When we talk about short-term teams, that's still one of the many things that people will do. But we don't bring a basketball team in to work and not take them to a feeding and not work in the school. Like it's just a part of the program now. So yeah, I love it, and I love that side of it, and that's probably the biggest way that God called me to the Philippines. But it's just a little piece these days.
Can you tell us more about the prenatal clinic or residential?
Yeah, Hope Alive Clinic. Hope Alive Clinic was started, I want to say 8 years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and it's every bit of the preparation for a woman in our community to have a baby. I mean, we have an ultrasound machine, we have a Doppler, we have a lying-in clinic, they call it, where they can come and labor, and I've had high school kids deliver babies because that's how it works in the Philippines. We have sorry, that might have sounded extreme. We have a midwife that is always there, and we have a nurse that is always there, but they need help. And if a woman comes into Hope Alive Clinic at 3 a.m, they come to our guest house, and they know, because we tell the people when they come on the trip, sign up. If there's a delivery, we'll let you know if we need someone. And they'll wake a couple of our short-term team members up. They'll come over and they'll sterilize as best they can. But what Rona is our midwife. Rona says we've had high school kids catch babies, is the way that she describes it. But it's everything. We provide prenatal vitamins. We talk about the eggs. We provide eggs because they need protein. We provide the Lugao, but we also do a Bible study, and we also do a lot of spiritual mentoring programs with them. And so when teams come over, they'll go to the Bible study, or they'll speak at the Bible study, or they'll just give a testimony. They'll come and help us do their vitals and weigh them and measure them and all of that stuff. But it is full on the only medical care they'll get when they're pregnant in that community. Unless there's a complication, and then we'll take them to a hospital.
How many women have you served there?
I wish I knew. About 4 years ago, we started taking the baby's footprint and putting it on the wall when they were born, and the wall's just full. I mean, it's probably like that. There's 2 different walls, but it's that wall full of baby footprints. So I don't know how many that is. It is not legal there. So wealthy people will leave. They'll go somewhere that it's not, or you can go to Quiapo, which is kind of like the inner city, and you can get medication that will. So they do it illegally, but it is not legal. So, someone who's already in a desperate situation, it does happen where they find a way to terminate their pregnancy, but they're doing it illegally, and it is pretty difficult and for them pretty expensive.
That's great.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The language, they all speak Spanish, and is that what you do in your schools?
They speak now. There's over 100 dialects, but their national language is Tagalog, which is it's combined with Spanish, and then so Tagalog. Then in the Visayas, it's Cebuano, but then there's every little area you go has a different dialect and a different way of speaking. The president in the 60s said, we're going to do school in English. And because he did that, he was able to really make Filipinos, give them a lot of opportunity with travel. Philippines' biggest export is people, and they send people to work overseas everywhere. As flight attendants, house help, nurses, they go anywhere they can, and they're well-traveled because they speak English. So the wealthier you are, the better your English, because the better school you went to. The poorer they are, it's sometimes not as good. But I've got kids that grew up, didn't go to school past 6th grade, that probably speak better English than I do in terms of people in the community, because they interact, like they're part of our ministry, and they interact with a lot of foreigners, and they know it. And it's it's Tagalog, English, Cebuano, and then 100 other things, Ilocano and yeah. Anyhow, it wouldn't mean anything to you. So yeah, but there's a lot of them.
Where are those kids going to use computers for the online classes?
The internet cafe is still a big thing over there. I mean, not right now. It's not. We've had to provide kids with internet pods so that they can get internet, and we've provided a bunch of those. And then, yeah, it's community. Everything is community. So they'd probably borrow one from aunt or uncle or somebody or their neighbor if they don't have one. And a lot of them, when we talk about online classes that we're doing, they actually don't end up doing it online. They come and pick up a packet at the school, take it home, do it if they don't have access to a computer. So we've tried everything we can to provide access so that kids don't get left behind in a sense, but everything is based on economics. So the ones that do have them, they have an easier time, but the ones that don't, they've got to make it's just more difficult for them. Yeah. Corruption, it's always corruption. It's so frustrating in a country. There's actually a lot of money in the Philippines. There's a lot of wealth. And it's just political. I mean, things seem bad here and fairly wild here, but it's nuts over there the way that the politicians live like out of this world in terms of the amount of money they have, and it's because they, like in our cultures, it's like you want to be a professional actor or a professional athlete, or and then you might take a couple steps back and become a politician. Like in the context of the Philippines, once you're done being a professional actor, or a professional athlete, you then have enough notoriety that you can really, what they say is, get the big bucks of being a politician. And it's frustrating. The government has borrowed over $5 billion from various sources because of COVID, and no one has any idea where it went. I mean, we were feeding 50,000 people a day because they had nothing to eat, and the government borrowed $5 billion. Like, it's the biggest issue and the most frustrating thing. So. No, I would say it's not heavy crime rates. People don't own guns. They can, but they just wouldn't have the financial capacity to own a gun. There's a lot of abuse within these little communities, drunken, disorderly kind of stuff. But in terms of like big crime, it's probably relegated to just drugs. And the president, if you've heard anything about the president of the Philippines, he's big anti-drug and when almost vigilante, like encourages cops to just shoot them. If you're caught using drugs, selling drugs, it was almost just, shoot them and we'll just deal with it later. And I mean, it worked. It worked for a while, but and here's what happened. Drug use started to go down, and then it got to the point where they realized how many politicians were involved in drug use, and then the justice stopped because of corruption. So it's, you'll have a kid on the street who's grown up with nothing and who got hooked on drugs, and they'll shoot him dead. But the politician who's enabling hundreds of thousands of people is given a free pass because of corruption, and it's. The Philippines. Surely. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's off the charts. It's probably just as big of an issue there as it is here. It happens. I mean, it's a Roman Catholic culture, which has a lot of stereotypical alcohol use, but stereotypes come often from a reality. And it's super inexpensive. And so it definitely is something that we deal with it. We deal with you can't walk through the community on a Friday night without the karaoke machine and the guys sitting around drinking bourbon or brandy or something, and they're loud and obnoxious. I mean, when we have people staying at the guest house, sometimes they're like, oh, I didn't sleep till 4 a.m. because they were up all night with the karaoke. And sometimes we have the karaoke machine at the guest house, so we try to fight back a little bit when we have big groups in, and we do it in a healthy and fun way, but we do some of that stuff too.
You mentioned they had a McDonald's. What other national food chains do they have that aren't just karaoke?
Honestly, they have almost anything you could want except for Chipotle. So yeah, they got Taco Bell. They do not have, Chipotle and Chick-fil-A, those would be the two that we don't have. But I've learned to make a pretty decent Chick-fil-A at home, so that works. I can't replicate Chipotle, though. You know, it's similar to here. The darker skinned you are, there is a perception of lower class from both sides. For us specifically, white people are often revered and often, because they're so romanticized, the American culture with Hollywood and stuff like that. We don't have any problems, except I get pulled over a lot and kind of I drive very authentic to the Philippines, but I get pulled over and shaken down a lot for money. Sometimes I did something wrong, sometimes I didn't. But these police officers are making, let's say, $10 a day. And so they'll say, oh, sir, your ticket is 600 pesos. And that's $12. But if I get a ticket, I have to go wherever I'm at. I have to go all the way into City Hall the next day or a week later to pick up my license. They take your license. So they'll often just, because they know it's wildly inconvenient, they'll often shake you down for lunch money, or what we call merienda, which is for a snack. And if you're white, you get asked for more, but not all, Sometimes I've found recently, if I say I'm a missionary, they let me go. If they think I'm a business person or an athlete who's there playing and making lots of money, they'll really stick to it. But call centers, Rice, export. Excuse me. They have, probably because people are their biggest export, what they do is they go work overseas and then they send money back. And so the remittance business is huge, like Western Union and things like that, because money is just coming back in from all these people that are working overseas. But because they are proficient in English, there's a lot of call centers. So because I can pay someone, a good call center will pay someone $20 a day. But if I'm trying to put a call center here, you're gonna pay that much an hour. So they get all the stuff over in the Philippines and get it set up, and they save a bunch of money, and they actually provide pretty good jobs for Filipinos to do call center work. But they have farming, they have fishing, and that's all pretty localized. But yeah, export, remittance, and call centers are probably two of the big ones. All right, okay, perfect. If you can, now I started working on this. Go ahead and turn to Habakkuk. If you can, we're just going to go chapter 1, verse 1 through 4, and then I'm going to, just a couple notes. I started working on this, and it's not done, so we'll have a full Habakkuk message. My threat to go super long was empty, because I'm not done with that sermon, but I do want to speak more in detail on this, but as I was reading through this, something that I had made a note to kind of get into for my personal study, which is often how I get into the messages I want to preach, I found this very, very fitting. And so what I like in kind of an intro to Habakkuk, there's a commentary, and it doesn't say who it's written by, but I'm going to read it to you. Habakkuk lived about 600 years before Christ. He lived in Judah. The country that ruled the part of the world until 612 BC was Assyria. In 612 BC, a country called Babylon beat Assyria, and then the Babylonians ruled. And then it gets down and it says, it talks about the leaders in Judah, and it says, these leaders did very cruel things to the people. The leaders did not obey the covenant they had with God. They promised to love God and to obey him, but the leaders did not love and obey God. So God said that he would punish Judah's people because of their leaders. And I thought, that's shocking. That's shockingly resemblant to where we are now. And so I want to read Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 1 through 4. The burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see, O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? Even cry out unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save. Why dost thou show me iniquity and cause me to behold grievance? For spoiling and violence are before me. And there are that raise up strife and contention. Therefore the law is slacked, and judgment doth never go forth. For the wicked doth compass about the righteous. Therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. So what happened is the leaders of Judah were not faithful, and they did not honor the covenant. And so God said, I'm going to send in the Babylonians. And here is Habakkuk, who is a prophet, and he's complaining to the Lord. And he says, how long shall I cry out over corruption, over murder, and I think about where we're at with abortion. And I think about where we're at, the Philippines, corruption, huge, but there's a lot of that stuff going on here. And I read through this, and I love the next verse. And I find peace in the next verse. It says, behold ye among the heathen, and regard and wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your days, which ye will not believe, though it be told to you. And I look at where we're at right now, and I think there really isn't anything else to find rest in. I think if we look at where we're at, and I talk to Dad a lot, we sit around and watch sports or plum houses. Occasionally I go with him, but we talk about this stuff, and it's like, it may not be November 3rd, it may be 4 years from now, but what else can God do with the leadership that we have in our country? I'm hoping one way in terms of an election, but we don't have great leaders. We don't have godly men leading us. And it is inevitable, it seems, that we are going to pay for that. It seems that we will lose a lot of comforts. And I talked about it a few weeks ago about comforts. It seems that is where God is going with this, whether it's now or 4 years from now or 8 years from now. I can't tell you the timing. But when we look at verse 5, I think that's where we should find the encouragement. I will work a work in your days which you will not believe, though it be told. God said to Habakkuk, I would tell you, but you're not even going to believe it. And that's the God we serve. That is the Jesus that came and died for us, is the one that said, I'm going to do something so magnificent and so spectacular that you're not even I couldn't even tell you about it because you wouldn't believe me. And I find comfort in that. And so as I look through, there is so much to unfold in the book of Habakkuk and in the book of Habakkuk and in those 4 chapters. But I want to encourage you tonight. No matter where you're at, no matter how difficult it might seem, no matter how difficult the road ahead appears, because, we were actually thinking, I hope we get back to the Philippines because I don't want to be here during the election. because it is going to get crazy. I think either way it gets crazy. And there are people that are emotional, and there are people that are struggling, and it's both sides. People are lunatics on both sides of the coin with where they're at. And I was encouraged, and I just want to remind you, God is doing something. And the way that we can take that to heart is jumping over to Proverbs 25. Proverbs 25:28. He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. And I love that passage. We actually went to youth camp, and a guy really got into that passage. And it's about controlling your spirit and controlling your attitude. Things will be tough. We know that. The Bible says, if they came after me, Jesus said, if they came after me, they're going to come after you. This is not going to be easy. And he says, I'm doing something spectacular. And the only thing that we can change about what he's doing sometimes is our attitude. And we talk about, and I definitely troll Facebook and look for the funny jokes, but I saw one and it said, if you're trusting in a donkey or an elephant, you will find nothing. If you're trusting in the Lamb, that's all you need. And I thought that's very fitting. Like, our faith and our trust and our security is in Jesus Christ. If we put our faith in politics, it is going to fail us. If we put our faith in how we feel about the results of an election, it's going to fail us. We may be ecstatic. We may not be. And you can look at every different angle. If your faith is in anything other than Jesus Christ, you have no walls. You have no walls around your city. And you get into Habakkuk and you talk about being, he sent the Babylonians in to make right some wrongs and to show the people that he was God and he was not going to stand for what they were doing. Even in that scenario, even if you're in the midst of sin, if you're in the midst of people that don't believe the same way you do, you serve under leaders who are corrupt, who allow murder through abortion, who maybe even murder people depending on what you believe about Hillary Clinton. But if you have rule over your spirit, if you have rule over your attitude, none of these things change anything, because we do not trust in any of these things, but only in Jesus Christ. And that's the challenge. As God is doing stuff, find your rest and find your peace and your strength in his walls, in his security. And so that's what I wanted to leave you with. I actually hope to maybe at the end of our time here get into that a little more, but that was kind of the little bit that God gave me today, time pending.